On to the final session of the day, Fireside Chat with Rubicon Carbon. 3 is the magic number, so our third Englishman in New York is the superb Sebastien from BeZero. Note to self, work on moderator diversity next time. I don't know whether it's my unconscious bias of being a Scotsman, but that we apparently don't like the English. That's not true, that's a stereotype. Although I do have a story where my wife and I went up to Scotland once to see my folks, and she decided she would do the good thing and see her cousins, and our cousin said, "Have you seen Braveheart?" She goes, yes. "Now you know why we hate the English." Oh, okay, right. Oh, anyway, so I am an avid listener to Howard Marks' The Memo, and so when it comes to thinking about markets, I think Howard is one of the best minds out there. Some of his quotes are, "The market is a voting machine in the short term and a weighing machine in the long term." He talks how investors make money from mispricing and enduring volatility, and the key objective is to optimize rather than maximize. And his latest one is, "Shall we ditch the laws of economics?" It's definitely worth a listen. So I can't think of a better way to sort of wrap up the day. We've started with science. We tried to move into the economics. We have Jen, who's the Chief Science Officer, who was part of the IPC team that won the 2007 Nobel Prize. And to the economics, and very much importantly to the markets and the financial markets, we have our own Wall Street legend here, and Tom Montag. So over to you, Seb, and the Rubicon team. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. And I want to say what a pleasure it is to be able to moderate this panel. As Gordon said, we've got 2 of the leading minds across science and finance on the stage here, and that's really what the carbon market is trying to embody. We're trying to bring science and finance together to help finance climate solutions. So, and what better venue to be doing it in? The New York Stock Exchange, a venue with a rich history of helping people to understand and manage risk. The carbon markets doesn't have quite the same history of understanding risks. We've had a few false starts in the past, and you often see quality used quite a lot in the carbon markets. We see quality attached to, or high quality attached to, a range of different things, and that's often conflated with risk. And the 2 are quite different. Quality is subjective, risk is not. And so I guess to kick it off, Jen, with you, obviously, the carbon market has risks, and we need to understand those risks. So talk us through how you're seeing risks both within the carbon markets and indeed to the carbon markets and its ability to scale.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that. It's a pleasure to be here. What a lovely crowd and a beautiful venue. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk today. So yeah, we're talking about risk. I would put, to your point, Seb, I would put risks in sort of 2 categories, right? I think the first category of risk that I think that we need to address in the market is, frankly, risks to the market, right? There's a lot of outside external factors right now that are limiting the market's ability to scale, and people are afraid to invest, right? There's a lack of demand, there's a lack of investment, and those 2 things kind of go together. And those risks, in my view, I would categorize them in sort of 2. The risks to the market, I think, are twofold. One is that the sort of atmosphere and the environment of civil society players that today, up to now, right, has sort of almost governed the market and set the standards and sort of helped companies and developers to decide what is good enough, right? I think the risk is that that group of civil society players would sort of fail to understand what moves businesses, and to create and as a result, right, will continue as they have to create incentives or to fail to create incentives that will be meaningful for businesses to take action, right? We know that we're going to need $275 trillion between now and 2050 to get ourselves to net zero. Where is that money going to come from? Probably not governments, probably not philanthropies. We need it to come from the private sector. And the risk to the market today is that it wouldn't scale because we sort of fail to create the right incentives. That's the first risk. The second risk to the market, and I think if you've been here for the whole morning session, you've seen there are a lot of different types of credits. My other sort of concern is that we may fail to invest in the credits that are going to do the most in the most economically efficient way to limit emissions. For example, protecting nature. And so, I think to the extent people are choosing to invest in removals, right? And if you have been in the market, you know what this means. I won't bore you with sort of the discussion. But, a lot of companies right now are moving to removals because of, frankly, risk number one, right? They're afraid of the credibility sort of gap that they perceive, right, due to civil society pressure. But what that means is we're going to fail to invest in protecting the standing stocks. We're going to fail to protect nature and the avoided emissions that we can generate, right? If we put our money to work protecting, the existing standing stocks. So those are sort of the two risks that I would see right now to the market.
And I guess to that point then of building the confidence people need to be willing to interact in this market, and indeed to transact in this market. Obviously, what you guys are doing at Rubicon is very interesting because you are trying to provide a product that adjusts for risk and gives people higher confidence in what they're buying. So do you want to talk a bit about the kind of approach that you're taking there?
Yeah, and I love that question. Thank you. What people don't understand, and this is what I love about working with Tom and sort of understanding and putting together the finance and the science, there is risk in every single project, right? The finance community understands this. They get it, right? And they manage that risk, right? What the carbon community doesn't seem to understand is that there's risk in those carbon projects too, right? And the trick is going to be in managing that risk. So that's been really, I think that's the sort of mind shift that I think this market really needs to make. How does Rubicon handle that? So we offer, and I'll let Tom add and sort of correct. We offer portfolios of credits in certain categories, right? Our portfolios can be offered on what we call a risk-adjusted basis, right? So we have a framework. We call it the Rubicon Carbon Integrity Framework, where our science team breaks down the individual categories of risk sort of one by one. And so for each of the projects that we offer on our platform, we have what's called a Rubicon Carbon Integrity Score that is made up of the risk scores in all five of the sort of different risk categories. And we've put them on a numerical scale from a 0 to 100, and then we roll them up into a sort of overall score that each project gets, right? So as a customer, you see what the risks are that are sort of inherent in each one of your projects. And you can choose projects based on what the most important thing is to you. And then, the other thing we do is we offer to risk adjust the credits, right? It's important that a ton be a ton for accounting purposes. And so when a customer chooses to retire a credit from one of our portfolios, we assess at the time of retirement the sort of level of risk. And typically it's a carbon accounting risk. So it's an over-crediting risk, which is the most sort of common risk we see in the market right now for the credits that are in our portfolios. And we will then retire additional credits sort of from our balance sheet in the background so that nobody will ever use those credits to compensate for their emissions. And the credits that we then deliver to the customer when that customer is ready to retire are as close as we can get to having 1 ton of impact per credit. So that's how we're looking at risk.
Fantastic. And so I guess to elaborate on that, Tom, obviously, ex-CFO of Bank of America, yeah. You're still on the risk committee at Goldman, is that right?
Yeah.
So, rich history in financial markets.
The risk committee at Goldman.
Coming over to carbon markets and applying what you know from financial markets in carbon markets is obviously a fantastic vote of confidence in where you see this market going. How do you see stuff like portfolio theory being applied to the market? How can it overcome some of the issues that we're seeing in the market? Perhaps like the overhang of legacy credits in the market, for instance, where we know there is some value, but they potentially don't all equal a ton of carbon.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting because when I first came into the voluntary carbon market, I didn't really know a lot about that. I knew a lot about green bonds, sustainable financing, and those types of things that we were doing at Bank of America. But I didn't know about the voluntary carbon market. I remember sitting down with Jen and a group when the company was first started, and they were talking about some project, and the project was at 75% of what we thought was 75% of what they had been credited, and therefore it's bad. And I'm used to the finance world. I say if a bond is, all bonds are issued at 100, and if now the company can only afford to pay you back 80, somebody still will pay 78 for it to get the 80 back from the company. They won't pay. It won't be zero. And this seemed to be more of a binary market. It's either one or it's worthless. And that's, by the way, that's a tough market for an investor to invest in. When if you don't meet your projection exactly, or something goes wrong, or something you lose all your investment because no one will buy it. And so the idea around that was, well, is there some way for us to unlock the value that is still there? Because of course, the way the crediting works, it's 1 ton from the registry, but it's not really worth a ton. And so that's how we got on this journey of risk adjusting and over crediting and over retiring to be able to do that. So we think it's the way to unlock that and get more investors in, because they feel more comfortable that they can get what's out there. And I don't know about all of you, but most projections I've seen from projects in my life, it's tough to get whatever you thought you were going to get 10 years out. Mm-hmm. And if you can get within 10 or 20%, that's pretty good in a lot of venture capital sense. And so we have that one thing that we've worked with that way. And another thing is, how do we look at these projects and put them together to create better value from diversification and combined with risk adjustment, so people feel more insulated from the risk that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny market when comparing to financial markets, where if you were a pension advisor and you're invested in just a couple of stocks, you'd be sacked pretty quickly. But you see people doing it quite often in this market, right?
Well, I looked at it kind of like the housing market after 2008. Like there's so many homes out there that need to be sold or being foreclosed on that the market can't restart itself. And so until you can clean up basically the stock, and some states allowed those foreclosures to happen very quickly, and their price of homes recovered quickly. In other states, a very long time. And so the market can benefit you if you can all these kind of hung up credits that we have. If there's some way for us to clean them up, and it'll be good for the whole market going forward. That's what we think.
And so, I guess given your network and your background, one of the challenges for the carbon market is translating climate science into financial parlance, because you need the CFOs of businesses to care about this as well as the CSOs. Yeah. How have you seen that evolve in your discussions? Like how far along are we in seeing people recognize and price their emissions across the businesses you talk to?
Well, I think a lot of people are doing that. I think a lot of people have put their journey and their footprint in what they're doing. So I think that's progressing well. It's actually how they understand it. The question is what they're doing about it, and how fast the insetting is, and what risks they're willing to take. Because the risks now, I think the CFOs, they're very careful about what they say, because it'll trigger lawsuits if you did the wrong thing. It'll trigger lawsuits if they think you're greenwashing in some way, and what you're going to have to disclose going forward. So I think they're very careful about what they say and what they do. But I think internally they're definitely doing the work around, what can we do, what should we do, and what can we afford to do.
Yeah. And it would be interesting to see how that progresses, because as carbon prices rise, you see more compliance markets. Particularly for the voluntary market, you need the mandate to be spending that money, right? You need to see sufficient pressure for the CFO to sign off on it. And do you think that's there yet? Do you think that they have the mandate to be investing meaningfully in what you guys are providing through the voluntary carbon market? And if not, like how do we get there?
Well, some clearly do, because you can see it in the paper the amount. Some clearly do, and they've made Microsoft is the obvious example, but there's many companies in that space. But it's a very small world. I mean, if you look at the number of retired credits, even this year, 80 companies will make up 90% in America. 80 companies make up 90% of retired credits. Even globally, if you look at retired credits, about 150 companies make up 90%. So it's a very, it's a small group of very large companies that are largely doing this now, and the other ones are kind of on their journey and doing it slowly. But it still is a kind of a procurement market as opposed to finance market. in that sense. You know, the way that documentation works, the way payment terms works. Everything you do with somebody have their own document. I used to be in the derivatives market at its beginning, and how we haven't really standardized how things get paid and closed and all those things. And I think we need to do that to make some liquidity in the market and how people look at it.
Yeah, and hopefully, well, presumably the product that you're offering in saying that you are managing the risk at least helps them build the confidence to be investing in the first place.
I mean, that's right. The whole key is Jen,
yeah,
and her science team, and having that underlying. And by the way, and your company plays a big role in this too, in giving credibility and security around the market and what you're looking at and understanding the market. It's invaluable what you guys do, and I think it's invaluable what we do in giving people, you know, our opinion of the project and helping them on that journey.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute. I guess, Jen, because you were alluding to kind of project types and you know, your removals versus avoidance. You know, what project types are you guys focused on at the moment? You know, where are you kind of most excited about potentially you know, investing in the market at the moment?
Yeah. So our portfolios that are sort of off the shelf right now come in 3 versions, right? There's a nature-based emissions reductions, and that is tropical deforestation protection, right? That's REDD+ projects that we like, right? So it's a select group. It's a fairly limited group of REDD+ projects from around the world that are extremely high quality. Our second portfolio right now is it's an industrial, soon to be sort of super pollutant elimination portfolio, right? That is methane reduction, HFC reclamation, that kind of thing. Those are sort of, again, underappreciated, less sexy, if you will, but still very, very important, super, super critical. And many of those projects actually just recently earned CCP approval through the ICVCM, which we're thrilled about. So that's great. And then our third portfolio that's off the shelf is a blended removals portfolio. And it's, you know, really just to keep the price point down, because some of those, if you heard from the last panel, the engineered removals are, right now, the price point is sort of inaccessible for a lot of companies. So our removals portfolios mostly, you know, sort of in the nature-based, 95% nature-based removals. So that's what our sort of off-the-shelf portfolio is. But really, we are working to invest in lots of other kinds of projects. And I would say the projects that we've most recently announced have been in the afforestation sort of restoration space. We recently announced a collaboration with a developer named Pantera. We have investment together with Microsoft and Carbon Streaming in that investment, and that was a reforestation project in Panama. And then with a developer, Imperative, we've got a reforestation project in South Africa that we've also just announced. So those are the kinds of sort of investments on the long term that we've been making.
Fantastic. I'm keen to open it up to the room. I know as well we're the last panel before lunch, so I dare not overrun. But are there any questions in the audience? At the back there.
I would say we're before the stock market existed. Yeah, they're very early stages because there's very little liquidity. People tend to buy and just retire, and so you don't have liquidity in that sense. And so and it's a limited market. So it kind of feels venture capitalist. If you talk about what Jen was talking about, the other thing I talk about in modern finance is like the time value of money. You know, if I offered you $1 in 10 years or $1 today, I'm pretty sure you'd say, well, just give it to me now, please. But in carbon, there isn't, like, you don't get a big benefit from doing your project, buying your retire now. I mean, you should, or buying and retiring in 10 years. There's no mechanism to kind of give that value to the action. And so you don't have that pressure to do it now as much as you want. I use this story because I like this story. But there was a Brown University professor wrote about the Brown journey to be net zero. And he said they had gotten to 50% of where net zero, and they felt like they were going to be there for the next decade or two because there was nothing else they could do at the campus. And so the title of the article is why I used to not like carbon credits, and now I like carbon credits. And so he decided, well, why are we going to sit here for the next decade while we're waiting for these things to happen and emit when we can invest in some carbon offsets in the interim to do it? And I love that story that like he realized there was so much value in basically making them zero now versus waiting a decade. I mean, they could have waited a decade, but they used this market and some of the projects that we actually like to offset themselves. And so I hope that gets the momentum like that. As we think as people go on their journey, they're going to get stuck at places. And one of the things we think is going to happen is it's not going to be that easy to get to zero. And so you're going to need these projects and things to go on. We wanted to get it to what you're saying though. I think by 2030 we could be in a place where it has some liquidity and has that aspect to it. We're trying to do that.
There's another question there.
Yeah, we think government regulatory can help a lot in the voluntary markets, and I think we think something's going to happen that'll make it even a better. It'll make robust for this market going forward. I just remember the story of one of the major oils was offering products. They offer regular products and then carbon neutral products, where they were basically offsetting them themselves, and people just weren't willing to pay for that offsetting in that way. They just weren't. So there wasn't this like groundswell of people willing to pay more money. So I think we need the government and I think that we need things like the California cap and trade market, where you can some offsets are allowable as offsets against your cap and trade in California, and that works well. That in New York, by the way, I don't know the latest, Jen, but New York is proposing a cap and trade market. I don't believe they were allowing offsets in
Yeah,
theirs.
I think they still aren't.
So that's the kind of thing Jen and a group she started called BACA are trying to do to help influence some of the legislation that's going on to allow carbon offsets, because we think if you really want as much money as Jen talked about, I think you have to have this market to get that money.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, I think we're out of time. So I want to say thank you to my two fantastic panelists. And yeah, I think we'll...
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. So just a thank you to all of our stellar lineup, and thank you for staying with us. There's lunch being served, but it's a final thought. I love thanking the ICE and the New York Stock Exchange teams for putting this together. So today, through Hume's microscope, razors and forks, I hope we've managed to help you observe and experience that carbon markets are things and not just a belief system. And through reason and logic, if we can use carbon pricing, we can help preserve the ultimate scarce resource. And I'm going to leave you with one quote. It's from Professor Michael Greenstone from the University of Chicago. So in terms of free market thinking, it's one of the icons of free market thinking. And he says, if you don't have price, you're in the land of the fairies, unicorns, and pots of gold at the end of the rainbow. Thank you very much.